There exists within the human heart a theater of eternal mystery, where attraction unfolds not as conscious choice but as sacred choreography between seen and unseen forces. Here, in this dimly lit stage of the soul, we find ourselves drawn again and again to figures who shimmer at the edges of emotional availability, phantoms who dance just beyond our reach, casting shadows that speak to something ancient and unhealed within us. This is not the dance of bodies meeting bodies, but the deeper ballet of wounds, recognizing wounds, of unconscious patterns spiraling through generations like smoke from forgotten fires. The person who cannot fully meet us emotionally becomes a living mirror, their unavailability reflecting back the very places where we too learned to withhold ourselves from love's complete embrace. They are not our tormentors but our teachers, not our enemies but the keepers of keys to rooms within ourselves. We have long forgotten how to enter in childhood's twilight hours. When the world first taught us the complex grammar of love and abandonment, we absorbed lessons written in invisible ink teachings about worthiness and distance, about how much of our hearts we could safely offer without risking complete annihilation. These early engravings upon the soul create the template through which we later perceive all potential beloveds, drawing us magnetically toward those who recreate the familiar emotional climate of our earliest longings. The emotionally unavailable beloved becomes the perfect guardian of our own unintegrated capacity for presence. They protect us from the terrifying vulnerability of being truly seen while simultaneously triggering our deepest hunger for recognition. In their careful distance, we find the exquisite tension that keeps us safely suspended between desire and fulfillment, longing and satisfaction, a place where the ego can maintain its carefully constructed defenses while the soul cries out for union. This is where our journey into the labyrinth of self-discovery begins. At the threshold where conscious intention meets unconscious compulsion. Here, if we have the courage to pause in our pursuit of these elusive figures, we might glimpse the golden thread that has been waiting to guide us not toward the phantom dancers who captivate our attention, but toward the deeper chambers of our own hearts, where the real work of love's alchemy awaits. The dance of shadows is calling us home to ourselves. Beneath the carefully constructed facade of adult competence lives an eternal child, suspended in time at the moment when love first revealed its conditional nature. This inner child carries within its tender heart the blueprint of all future attractions, a sacred map drawn in tears and longing, marking the territories where affection was promised but never fully delivered, where presence was offered and then mysteriously withdrawn, like Persephone, innocently gathering flowers in the meadow of childhood before being drawn into the underworld of complex love. We find ourselves magnetically pulled toward souls who recreate the familiar emotional landscape of our earliest formation. The parent who loved us from across an invisible chasm of their own unhealed wounds becomes the template through which we perceive all future beloveds. The caregiver who could offer care but not true emotional intimacy lives on in our unconscious as the prototype of desirability itself. This is the sacred repetition compulsion that governs the heart's mysterious selections, not pathology but the psyche's most profound attempt at healing. The unconscious, in its infinite wisdom, continues to present us with variations of the original wound, hoping that this time, with this person, we might finally receive what was denied us in those crucial early chapters of becoming. Each emotionally unavailable beloved carries within them the ghost of the first love that taught us to equate affection with yearning, connection with distance, devotion with disappointment. The wounded child within us recognizes something familiar. In their carefully guarded hearts, the same protective mechanisms, the same fear of complete surrender that once lived in the adults who shaped our earliest understanding of love's possibilities. We are drawn not to their wholeness but to their brokenness, not to their capacity for intimacy but to the ways they hold themselves apart. Because in their emotional unavailability we recognize the echo of our own first teachers in love's complex curriculum. In this recognition lies both our imprisonment and our liberation. For it is only when we understand that we are seeking not love but familiarity, not healing but repetition, that the possibility of choosing differently begins to emerge from the depths of our unconscious inheritance like dawn breaking over a landscape we thought was forever condemned to darkness. Chapter 3. We become masterful architects of our own emotional fortresses, crafting personas of fierce independence that proclaim to the world and to ourselves that we have transcended the messy vulnerabilities of human need. These carefully constructed masks whisper seductive lies about our self-sufficiency, our evolution beyond the primitive hungers that drive lesser souls toward the dangerous territories of emotional dependence. Yet beneath this polished exterior of autonomy lies a soul parched with thirst, secretly yearning for the very connection our persona so eloquently denies. The emotionally unavailable beloved enters our life as the perfect co-conspirator in this elaborate theater of mutual avoidance. They become our ideal partner in a dance, where both dancers maintain their distance while moving to the same rhythm of protected hearts. Their inability to fully meet us emotionally serves as confirmation of our persona's carefully rehearsed narrative that we are indeed beyond such mundane needs, that we have achieved a rarefied state of emotional self-containment that others can only aspire to reach. In this exquisite arrangement, both souls find sanctuary in their separate towers of invulnerability. We can feel safely superior in our independence while they remain comfortably unreachable in theirs. The distance between us becomes a sacred buffer zone where neither party must face the annihilating terror of complete emotional exposure. We are connected yet untouchable, intimate yet protected, loving yet fundamentally alone. This dance of mirrors allows us to experience the intoxicating drug of attraction without the sobering medicine of true intimacy. We can indulge in the sweet and ache of longing while our persona remains intact, can taste the honey of connection while our defenses stay firmly in place. The emotionally unavailable other becomes our perfect enabler, allowing us to maintain the illusion of emotional evolution while keeping us trapped in the very patterns of avoidance we believe we have transcended. In their careful distance, we find validation for our own emotional unavailability, proof that love is indeed too dangerous to fully embrace, that the wise heart keeps itself partially withdrawn from the chaos of complete surrender. Yet this mutual imprisonment masquerades as freedom. This shared avoidance presents itself as sophisticated love, when in truth it is simply two frightened souls finding refuge in their familiar patterns of beautiful, tragic separation. Chapter. For what we perceive as their maddening emotional unavailability often serves as a sacred mirror, reflecting back our own discomfort with presence, our own carefully cultivated distance from the raw territories of authentic feeling, like the ancient alchemists who projected their visions of gold onto base metals, believing the transformation lay in the substance rather than in their own capacity for transmutation. We cast our unlived emotional life onto these mysterious figures who dance at the periphery of intimacy. They become unwitting carriers of everything. We have not yet learned to embody ourselves the capacity for deep vulnerability, for sustained emotional presence, for the kind of intimate availability that requires us to dismantle the protective walls we have spent lifetimes constructing. In their apparent inability to meet us fully, we see reflected our own unconscious refusal to show up completely in love's arena. Their emotional distance becomes a repository for our own disowned capacity for closeness. Their unavailability a walking symbol of our own fear of being truly nakedly seen. This projection serves as a masterful defense mechanism, allowing us to focus our attention on their shortcomings while remaining blind to the ways we hold ourselves apart from love's complete embrace. We can spend years analyzing their patterns of withdrawal, their fear of commitment, their inability to sustain intimate connection, all while unconsciously maintaining our own sophisticated forms of emotional unavailability. We become experts in recognizing their defenses while remaining unconscious of our own. The mysterious other transforms into a living screen upon which we project all the unlived aspects of our emotional potential. They carry our capacity for depth when we cannot yet access it ourselves, embody our hunger for intimacy when we are still too frightened to own it fully, represent our longing for emotional courage when we have not yet developed the strength to be truly vulnerable. In making them the sole guardian of these qualities, we relieve ourselves of the responsibility of cultivating them within our own hearts. This sacred projection keeps us locked in a dance of pursuit and withdrawal, forever seeking in another what we have not yet learned to recognize within ourselves, the very qualities we find so magnetically attractive in them. Even their unavailabilities speak to aspects of our own emotional nature that remain unexplored, unintegrated, waiting in the shadows of our consciousness to be reclaimed and brought into asterisk. The light of conscious relationship with ourselves and others. In the deepest chambers of the psyche, where light has never dared to venture, dwells that which we have cast away, the shadow, dark twin of our conscious self. Here, in this underground palace of the rejected, live all the abandoned children of our becoming. The vulnerability we learned was dangerous. The need we discovered brought only disappointment. The tender reaching that was met with absence and taught us that love itself was a wound waiting to happen. The shadow does not sleep. It prowls the corridors of our unconscious, carrying in its arms all the emotional availability we once possessed, that raw, open-hearted capacity to love and be loved that our young souls offered freely until the world taught us otherwise. In the nursery of our becoming, we learned the cruel mathematics of survival, that to need was to suffer, that to reach was to be left empty-handed, that to love was to invite the very abandonment that would shatter us into fragments. And so we buried these tender parts alive, entombing them in the shadows, embraced, believing we were protecting ourselves from further harm. But the shadow, like all rejected aspects of the soul, seeks expression through projecting, casting itself onto the world stage through the very people who magnetize our deepest longing. Enter the emotionally unavailable beloved, walking into our lives like a figure from our own unconscious drama. They carry our shadow-made flesh, embodying the very distance we learned to cultivate, the very unavailability we mastered as children when closeness became too dangerous to bear. We are drawn to them not despite their emotional remoteness, but precisely because of it, for in their practiced withdrawal, we recognize the mirror of our own survival strategy. This is the shadow's magnetic pull. We seek in them what we have rejected in ourselves. Their inability to give becomes the perfect container for our inability to receive. Their fear of intimacy reflects our own terror of being truly seen. Their emotional walls echo the fortress we built around our own heart when we learned that love and pain were not separate experiences but twin aspects of a single, devastating truth. The distant lover becomes our shadow's perfect ambassador, allowing us to experience our own emotional unavailability from the outside, to feel the ache of being the one who reaches while remaining safely distant ourselves. In loving them, we love the parts of ourselves we could not accept, the wounded child who learned that disconnection was survival, that absence was safer than presence, that longing was preferable to the vulnerability of having. Deep within the masculine soul dwells the anima, that eternal feminine principle that seeks wholeness through union, completion through the sacred other. She is the bridge between conscious and unconscious, the mediator of all relationship, the vessel through which the soul learns to love. In her pure form, she guides us toward authentic connection, toward the profound intimacy that transforms both lover and beloved into something greater than their separate selves. But when the anima becomes wounded in the crucible of early experience, when she drinks from the poisoned well of abandonment and betrayal, her sacred purpose becomes distorted. No longer does she seek healthy love, instead, she hungers for familiar suffering. No longer does she guide us toward genuine connection, instead, she orchestrates the sweet agony of perpetual longing. The wounded anima learns to equate love with pain, union with absence, devotion with the exquisite torture of reaching toward that which remains forever beyond grasp. This contaminated anima finds a perfect object in the emotionally unavailable beloved. Here is someone who can maintain the archetypal drama without threatening the carefully constructed defenses that protect both souls from the terror of true intimacy. The distant lover becomes the anima's ideal, neither fully present nor completely absent, but suspended in that liminal space where desire can flourish without the risk of fulfillment. For the wounded anima has learned a terrible wisdom that consummation destroys the magic, that possession kills the dream. She prefers the eternal tension of almost love to the vulnerable reality of actual intimacy. In the emotionally unavailable beloved, she finds someone who will keep the sacred fire burning without ever letting it consume. The carefully maintained distance that both protects and tortures. This is the anima's eternal search, not for love itself, but for the perfect container for unfulfilled longing. The unavailable beloved becomes her sacred shrine, the altar upon which she can pour her devotion while ensuring that the offering will never be fully received. In this dynamic, both souls remain safely imprisoned in their separate towers, reaching toward each other across an unbridgeable chasm that they simultaneously curse and cherish. The anima's wisdom becomes perverted into a kind of spiritual masochism, where suffering is mistaken for depth, where pain is confused with passion, where the absence of the beloved becomes more precious than their presence ever could be. She transforms the natural impulse toward union into an elaborate dance of approach and withdrawal, ensuring that love remains forever in the realm of potential rather than actuality. Beautiful, terrible, and eternally unfulfilled. There exists, in the human soul, a strange magnetism toward the familiar, even when the familiar is pain itself. Like ancient pilgrims who return year after year to sacred sites of suffering, we find ourselves drawn to the emotional landscapes of our earliest years, those primal territories where love first wore the mask of absence, where connection came, wrapped in the cloth of disappointment, where presence and distance learned to dance together in the choreography of our becoming. In the ache of unrequited longing, we discover not torment but homecoming. The heart recognizes its native climate in the mixture of hope and despair. In the bittersweet symphony of almost love that plays the same haunting melody our souls learned in the nursery of our formation. This is not the masochism of the wounded, when the recognition of the familiar, the psyche's unconscious pilgrimage back to what it knows, even when what it knows is the exquisite agony of loving from a distance. The emotionally unavailable beloved becomes our perfect shrine to this familiar suffering. In their practiced withdrawal, we find the textures of our earliest attachments, the parent who was sometimes there and sometimes not, the caregiver who loved with conditions and withheld without explanation, the first gods of our small universe, who taught us that love was not a steady presence but a flickering flame that could be extinguished by forces beyond our understanding or control. We mistake this recognition for love itself, confusing the comfort of the known with the call of the heart. The soul, in its wounded wisdom, seeks to heal the original fracture by recreating it, believing that if we can somehow make the unavailable person choose us, we will finally heal the child who was not chosen, not seen, not held in the steady embrace of unconditional presence. This is the terrible comfort of familiar suffering. It asks nothing new of us. We know how to live in the space between hope and disappointment. We are fluent in the language of longing. We have made an art of loving from a safe distance, never having to risk the vulnerability of being fully met, fully seen, fully received by another human being. In choosing the emotionally unavailable, we choose the devil we know over the angel we fear to meet. We remain in the familiar territory of our original wound, circling it like a sacred fire that both warms and burns, unable to leave but never quite able to rest in its light. Beneath the surface of our conscious longing for connection lies a terror so primal, so absolute, that it shapes the very architecture of our attractions. This is not the simple fear of rejection or abandonment, but something far more profound, the fear of annihilation that whispers in the depths of the psyche. When true intimacy beckons, for to be truly intimate is to die a kind of death, to allow the carefully constructed fortress of the ego to dissolve in the presence of another soul who sees us completely, without the protective veils of persona and pretense. The emotionally unavailable beloved becomes our perfect sanctuary from this terror. They offer us the illusion of seeking love while protecting us from ever having to receive it fully. In their practiced distance, we find safety, the comfort of longing without the vulnerability of having, the sweetness of desire without the terror of fulfillment. They become our refuge from the complete exposure that authentic love demands, allowing us to remain hidden behind the beautiful suffering of unrequited devotion. To be truly seen by another is to risk the dissolution of everything we believe ourselves to be. The ego, that carefully crafted identity we've spent lifetimes building, trembles at the prospect of melting into union with another consciousness. What if, in being fully known, we discover we are not who we thought we were? What if love's mirror reflects back not the image we've polished but the raw, unguarded truth of our being, wounded, imperfect, beautifully broken? The unavailable lover protects us from this cosmic vulnerability. They ensure we never have to strip away the layers of protection we've wrapped around our tender core. With them, we can play at love without risking love's ultimate demand, that we show up fully, naked of pretense, willing to be transformed by the encounter with another's authentic being. This fear runs deeper than psychology into the realm of the sacred and terrifying. True intimacy is a kind of spiritual death and rebirth. The ego dies so that something larger can be born. But the wounded psyche, having already experienced too much dissolution in early life, cannot bear the thought of further disintegration, even in service of love's promise of renewal. And so we choose those who will keep us safely at the threshold of intimacy, forever approaching but never crossing into that sacred territory where two souls meet and emerge transformed. The emotionally unavailable beloved becomes our guardian against the very thing we claim to seek, the annihilation and resurrection that true love promises to those brave enough to surrender to its alchemical fire. There comes a moment in the soul's journey when the fog of unconscious repetition begins to lift, when the patterns that have governed our attractions, like invisible puppet strings, suddenly become visible in the harsh light of awareness. This awakening does not arrive as a gentle dawn, but as a lightning striker illuminating in one terrible instant the vast landscape of our unconscious choices, revealing how we have been seeking not love but familiarity, not partnership but the endless recreation of our earliest emotional environment. The spell begins to crack when we finally see the pattern with clear eyes, how we have been drawn again and again to the same archetype wearing different faces, how our heart has been magnetized, not by love's promise but by the gravitational pull of our original wounds. In this moment of recognition, the automatic response that has guided our attractions begins to falter, like a hypnotic trance breaking under the weight of sudden consciousness. To see the pattern is to stand at the threshold between the old and the new, between the compulsion of the past and the possibility of choice. The realization dawns that we have been unconscious actors in our own drama, following a script written in the nursery of our becoming, speaking lines that were taught to us before we could even speak. But consciousness, once awakened, cannot be put back to sleep. It casts its light into every corner of our being, revealing the machinery of our attractions. The breaking of this spell is not a single moment but a gradual emergence from the enchantment of repetition. Like a sleepwalker gradually coming awake, we begin to feel the ground beneath our feet, to see the path we have been walking without awareness. The familiar emotional patterns that once felt like destiny begin to reveal themselves as choices, unconscious perhaps, but choices nonetheless. In this awakening, a new path appears through the ancient forest of our conditioning, faint at first, but growing clearer with each step taken in consciousness rather than compulsion. We begin to understand that we have been seeking completion in the wrong direction, trying to heal forward what can only be healed by turning inward, by reclaiming the disowned parts of ourselves that we have been projecting onto unavailable others. The spell of repetition breaks not with dramatic fanfare but with the quiet courage of choosing differently in the small moments when the old pattern beckons. Each time we recognize the familiar pull and choose awareness over automaticity, we weave a new thread into the fabric of our being, creating the possibility of loving not from wound but from wholeness. That now begins the sacred work of individuation, alchemical process by which the soul reclaims its scattered fragments and transforms the lead of unconscious projection into the gold of integrated awareness. This is not the gentle work of surface healing but the profound labor of psychological archaeology, excavating the buried treasures of our disowned nature and bringing them into the light of conscious embrace. Like the ancient alchemists who understood that transformation required a descent into the negredo, the blackening, the dark night of the soul, we must enter courageously into the darkness of our own emotional unavailability. We must meet face to face with the parts of ourselves that learned to withhold love as protection, that mastered the art of distance as survival, that became expert in the very withdrawal we claim to despise in others. This is the shadow's gift. Hidden within its curse, it carries not only our rejected wounds but our rejected strengths. Within our own capacity for emotional unavailability lies the wisdom of discernment, the knowledge of boundaries, the understanding that not every reaching deserves our response. We must integrate not only our abandoned vulnerability but our necessary protections, learning to be available without being consumed, present without being possessed. The work of reclaiming projections is like gathering children who have been sent away to live with strangers. One by one, we call back the aspects of our emotional nature that we cast onto others. Our capacity for intimacy, our ability to withdraw, our power to choose presence or absence. As we embrace these exiled parts of ourselves, the external drama that once captivated us begins to lose its magnetic pull. Only by becoming conscious of our own vast emotional range, our ability to be both available and unavailable, intimate and distant, present and withdrawn, can we transcend the compulsive attraction to those who embody our disowned nature. When we can meet both our longing and our independence with equal grace, we no longer need others to carry the burdens of our unconscious wholeness. This alchemical transformation does not happen overnight but unfolds like the slow blooming of a flower that has learned to trust both sun and rain. As we integrate our shadow's wisdom and reclaim our projections, we develop the capacity to attract and recognize emotional availability in others, not because we need it to complete us, but because we have learned to embody it ourselves. The true alchemy lies in this paradox. Only when we no longer desperately need emotional availability do we become capable of creating it, both within ourselves and in partnership with another who has undertaken the same sacred work of becoming whole. As the work of integration deepens, and we reclaim the scattered fragments of our emotional nature, a profound shift begins to ripple through the fabric of our being. The magnetic field that once drew us irresistibly toward the emotionally unavailable starts to transform. Like iron filings suddenly responding to a different compass. No longer do we vibrate at the frequency of longing and disappointment. No longer does the familiar ache of unrequited love feel like home. This transformation is not merely psychological but alchemical, a fundamental reorganization of our energetic signature. As we integrate our shadow and withdraw our projections, we begin to emanate a different quality of presence. The desperate seeking that once characterized our attractions gives way to a centered availability, a grounded openness that can both receive and offer love without the frantic edge of need. The external world, that faithful mirror of our internal state, begins to reorganize itself around this new frequency. Where once we encountered a parade of emotionally distant souls, now we find ourselves in the presence of those who have undertaken their own journey toward wholeness. The universe, it seems, responds to our transformation by reflecting back our new capacity for genuine connection rather than the old patterns of familiar suffering. This is not magic but law, the ancient principle that like attracts like, that we draw to ourselves what we have become. As we develop the ability to be fully present with our own emotions, we magnetize those who can be present with theirs. As we learn to offer authentic intimacy without losing ourselves in the process, we attract partners capable of the same delicate balance. The quality of our attractions shifts from compulsive to conscious, from desperate to discerning. We no longer find ourselves pulled by invisible strings toward those who will recreate our original wounds. Instead, we recognize and are recognized by souls who have done the sacred work of becoming available not just to others, but to themselves. This return to wholeness is not a destination but a continuous becoming, a spiral path that leads us ever deeper into our own authentic nature. Each step toward integration creates new possibilities for connection, new capacities for love that transcend the old paradigms of scarcity and suffering. We discover that we need not choose between independence and intimacy, between self-preservation and vulnerability. That mature love includes and transcends these apparent opposites. In this return to wholeness, we find ourselves capable of loving, not from emptiness but from fullness, not from wound but from wisdom, not from the fractured seeking of the ego but from the integrated presence of the self. In the end, when the alchemical work of transformation has been lovingly tended and the scattered fragments of the soul have been gathered home, love reveals its true nature not as the desperate seeking of the wounded child who hungers for what was never received, but as the sacred recognition between two beings who have learned to be fully present with themselves and therefore with each other. This mature love bears no resemblance to the compulsive attractions of our unconscious years. Gone is the magnetic pull toward emotional unavailability, dissolved in the light of our own integrated wholeness. When we no longer need others to carry our disowned emotions, when we have reclaimed the projections that once animated our romantic dramas, the attraction to distance transforms into an appreciation for presence. The desperate ache of longing gives way to something far more profound, the quiet joy of recognition. We see in the beloved not a missing piece of ourselves but a fellow traveler who has walked the same path of individuation, who has faced their own shadows and emerged not perfect but present, not healed of all wounds but capable of meeting those wounds with consciousness rather than compulsion. This love does not seek to fill an emptiness but to share an overflow. It does not demand the other's availability as proof of worthiness, but celebrates it as a gift freely given between two souls who have learned to be available to themselves. The frantic energy of need dissolves into the steady warmth of choice. We love, not because we must, but because we can. Not because we are incomplete, but because we are whole enough to offer our wholeness without losing ourselves in the giving. In this sacred recognition, we meet both intimacy and solitude with equal grace. We no longer fear the dissolution that true closeness brings because we have found our unshakable center, our unchanging core that remains intact even as it opens to the mystery of another's being. We can be alone without loneliness, together without losing ourselves, intimate without invasion, separate without abandonment. Love becomes not the desperate attempt to heal our childhood wounds through another's validation, but the celebration of two beings who have found their way home to themselves and choose to share that homecoming. It is the overflow of our own fullness, meeting the overflow of another's, creating not dependency but interdependence, not possession but mutual recognition of the sacred flame that burns in each human heart. This is love's final teaching, that we can only truly love another to the degree that we have learned to love ourselves completely.